Welcome to the Economic Development Group's weekly news update. I'm Shravan Putluri.
And I'm Julia Kempton. Today's story, following our meeting's theme of South American economics, will discuss the political dimensions of sanctions against the Venezuelan government, which in practice often come down to a question of business ties.
In 2018, Nicolas Maduro continued his reign as Venezuela's president by way of an election widely seen as fraudulent by independent observers and many Western governments. As a result, these Western governments, led by the US, imposed strict sanctions on Venezuela and its state-run oil company, the PDVSA. Juan Guaido, the head of the opposition-dominated National Assembly, was recognized by the West as interim president as anti-government protests shook the nation. Yet 3 years later, the protests have fizzled out and done little to shake Maduro's iron grip on power. A year into Russia's war in Ukraine, the US is beginning to revisit Venezuela as a valuable source of energy. In August 2022, French President Macron, formerly one of Maduro's biggest critics, met with Maduro during COP27 and acknowledged him as president. Guaido was voted out as leader of the opposition at the end of December.
When we talk about sanctions, we are usually referring to efforts managed by the U.S. Department of Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control, or OFAC, which follows executive orders from the president to create lists of companies or individuals, specially designated nationals, or SDNs, which U.S. companies are forbidden from doing business with. But they often have unintended consequences.
The Venezuelan economy took a sharp nosedive during Maduro's government, for a host of reasons, not least among them corruption, predatory policies, and a decline in global oil prices. But sanctions meant to push Maduro from power contributed to an almost total economic collapse. In 2017, 61% of Venezuelans reported occasionally going to bed hungry because food was so expensive or difficult to find. In 2018, inflation of everyday goods in Venezuela was already projected at something like 13,000%, with the bolivar depreciating 98% in 1 year. Things have not improved substantially since.
With most Venezuelans focused on their day-to-day survival, notable displays of political opposition faded. And when Russia invaded Ukraine last year and was subsequently sanctioned by the world community, Venezuela, with some of the world's largest oil reserves, was seen as something of a lesser evil. In October, the U.S. gave clemency to 2 relatives of Maduro's in exchange for the release of 7 American businessmen who had been detained in Venezuela for years. This November, talks led to the transfer of $3 billion in Venezuelan government funds, which have been frozen overseas, to a UN-administered humanitarian fund. Furthermore, the U.S. approved a license request for Chevron Corporation to expand its work in Venezuela.
Early in 2021, Juan Guaido told the New York Times that, quote, "I think we're close to a political solution because there's no way that Maduro can recover the international confidence that's the cornerstone of any economic recovery." End quote. As it happens, most of the world blink first. Foreign economies need oil, and humanitarian organizations found cooperation with the regime preferable to the risk of mass starvation and further poverty. Economics is often used as a tool of geopolitics. Countries use sanctions as a threat, or investment as a form of influence. But that relationship goes both ways. Business interests can come up against human rights or political principles, and often win.
Thank you all for listening.